And theoretically, we are live. So welcome to Plate Stack Chat Live. My name is Jason. I'm not sure how I feel about this being a live recording now, but a conversation between Savan and Peter on Coffee Pods and Wads really pushed me towards going live. And then Bill Grundler kind of just pushed me over the edge, saying how much better it was. And I know one of my guests, I think, also believes that live podcasts are better. So speaking of guests, each week I'm joined by two wonderful guests. So let's bring them out now. My first guest has been recently making her rounds as an MC at some local competitions here in the UK. She's also the host of the podcast, What Are You Talking About? And a lover of country music, but we will not hold that against her. Please welcome Leah Sherlock.
Hello.
Hello, Leah. Welcome to
Thank you for having me.
Plate Stack Chat. But of course, Leah is not alone. My second guest is one of the most well-traveled and well-informed people in the world of international CrossFit, who probably has stats on people you've never even heard of. He is the man and the name behind Be Friendly Fitness. Your friend and mine, it's Brian Friend.
You had to have written that out, right?
Of course, Brian. That's the level of research I do. That's when people ask, how do you prepare? That's what I prepare. And my notes now end. That's basically it.
Oh, that was well done. Thank you.
So I can relax now. So Brian, I know you and Leah haven't met despite the number of competitions you've both frequented. They just haven't been the same ones.
That's well, if she's primarily doing ones in the UK, then that would be the reason why, because nobody from the UK has contacted me to ask me to be involved in any competitions there.
Oh, is that entirely? I thought you were Wad on the Lock. Are you not involved with that?
No, that's true in Scotland.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I can't keep track of what terminology is appropriate for which geographical name places in that region of the world anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if England or Great Britain or the UK, or I don't even know what I'm necessarily referring to, because you guys have divvied it up and changed it up. I actually had a conversation with Peter about this. And he explained it to me. And then I asked him a question and he's like, well, actually, in that case, it's a little different. And I was like, exactly. I don't even know.
Growing up in England, I never understood it. I didn't understand it until probably about 2 years ago. And then I just saw like an Instagram reel that somebody had put up. And they basically, if I understand correctly, the UK is England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Britain is the island that we are on, which is composed of England, Scotland, and Wales. Great Britain is was the empire that, so all the territories that they own or kind of had sovereignty over. And the so what are we missing? And then obviously the others are the countries. England is England and Wales is Wales. And
okay.
In fact, this was the tricky thing of me saying that I was doing a UK tour for the Open, is that I was only going to England, Scotland, and Wales. And I just said, sorry, Northern Ireland, 3-week Open. If you want me there, speak to Dave Castro, to Boz, put an extra week on for the Open and I'll come.
I'm also really glad you just explained that, because I was thinking, don't ask me. I've got no clue.
Okay, I'm going to amend my statement then. I have not been invited recently to be involved in any competitions in England.
Okay, well, we'll rectify that. This podcast will rectify that. Let's. Well, it's funny. I was at. So you're. I mean, I wouldn't worry about that in the sense that you seem to be going all over the world and getting to see a lot of incredible athletes and going to some incredible competitions. And when I was at Strength in Depth Origins, that is 10 minutes from my house, so that's the level I'm willing to travel. Somebody there was saying to me, "Oh, are you going to any comps?" I think they even were talking about you and like all the comps you're going to, and they're saying, "Oh, are you going to go to any of these comps sort of outside of outside of the UK, outside of Europe?" And I was like, "Do you realize I'm losing money just being here? And this is 10 minutes from my house. Like I'm, maybe one day, but at the moment that's not on the cards. But hey."
It's very difficult in the space of CrossFit to find a way to actually travel to a lot of competitions and make money while doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think we've all noticed that. And yes, Wales is Wales. So, yeah. Well, how's the travel going? How are you coping with it?
When people ask me about this, I basically tell them that in whatever discipline you are in life, like at some point you just realize that you're kind of made for something. So, I'll go to a competition. It'll be 3-day competition, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Obviously, there's a lot of people volunteering and working at the competition. And by the end of the, middle of the day on Sunday, you can see people are just done. And that's not good, because actually the last half of the day on Sunday is where the most is at stake. Everything's on the line. Prizes are going to be won. Podiums are going to be earned, et cetera, et cetera. You need people to be at their sharpest. This is one thing that I think that competition organizers in general can improve at, is providing situations for everyone who's involved in putting on your competition that allows them to be at their best by the end of the weekend, instead of being at the burned out and totally over it, which happens far too often. But I never get like that. I just, even if after 4-day events, even after, traveling 10 time zones over, I don't know why. I just get to the end of the competition and I'm ready for the next one.
Wow, that's good.
Made for it.
Yeah. Well, I flew the other day for the first time in, I don't know, 8 years maybe. I hadn't been on a plane since I came back from Italy, and it was so funny, because when the time before, the last time I'd flown was moving from Italy back to England, and I'd been there for 10 years, and I accumulated stuff, and we had sort of all these bags that we were trying to travel with, and a 2-year-old, and it was like chaos just to get through the airport to get back home, kind of thing. And this time I was just flying, just from England to Scotland, so not a big flight. I was doing the row during 24.2 in the morning, and Joey, one of our coaches, just said to me, "I thought you were in Glasgow." And I was like, "Oh, I'm going up this afternoon." He's like, "Oh, I've got to go to the airport. Do you need a lift?" So I'm still rowing. This is how seriously I take the Open. I make travel arrangements while. So I was like, "Oh, actually, that's great." So then my wife doesn't need to drop me off. And it was just, so strange to just get a lift up, walk through the airport just with a backpack, nothing else, because I was only going for a day. Get on a plane, nobody's checking passports or anything, because it's just an internal flight kind of thing. And I was like, this is easy. Why haven't I done this for so long?
Yeah. Well, I've taken 19 flights already this year.
Wow, that's impressive.
I didn't keep track last year because I had no idea that travel was going to be as extensive. And then it was I think it was even maybe New Year's Eve, Snorri Barron was boarding a flight and he was like, "This is my 100th flight of the year." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to track next year just to see."
Do you think you'll beat him?
I don't know. We'll see.
I think he's probably I would feel that you'd confidently beat most, but Snorri, he seems to be somewhere new every week as well. So that's you should get like a kind of like an open leaderboard going with some of you that tracking your flights. That'd be good. I wonder if it counts flights or distance, because I think that would be interesting. I imagine there's a lot that are flying kind of around America, but they're potentially not going as far afield as you are.
Yeah. I mean, even so, I don't think there's very many people that are going to as many. Maybe they're flying for other things, managers and things like this, but to go to competitions primarily, I doubt it.
Is there anything you found? So I messaged Snorri yesterday because he's in the UK, he's in England, and he's like, "Oh, we're in England, we've got to go to Nando's." Then just before leaving England, one more stop at Nando's. I'm like, "Snorri, this Nando's obsession is like, this is an addiction. You need to get this under control." But is there anything that you're like, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to going back to this country because they have, X, Y, or Z," and that's something that, like, beyond the CrossFit side of things, just kind of finding joy in travel in itself, or is it laser focused on what you got to do?
Food. I mean, food would be the primary thing. There's just certain foods that are definitely better in the countries that they're kind of originally from. And then otherwise, I have like I can turn it on and turn it off kind of a mentality when it comes to travel. So for sometimes for competitions, I know I'm not going to be able to get out and do much else outside the competition because of whatever. Other times I know that there will be opportunities for that. And this last trip I was on, I had a full day to explore Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And then I had basically 2 full days to explore Istanbul, which is about 48 less days than you need to explore that entire city. But I tried to make the most of it anyway. And, you know, in those situations where I know that I'll have a day or two to travel, then I will kind of be intentional about actually doing some preparation to say, okay, what's the best things I can do to maximize that time? But that's about it.
Yeah. So as I said, I've also just got to mention that La Roche is in the chat. So people feel like, oh, I thought you said these guys were too busy to podcast now, and then he's here in the chat. Why isn't he on? Sorry, secrets have been revealed. But thanks for joining us, Sam. And Buck's saying about the Turkish bathhouse, so we'll come back to that. So I used to work in Venice, and it's amazing that like the two mentalities of people visiting Venice. You would have people that would come back like year after year because they wanted just to explore every little avenue of Venice, and then you'd have people that could see it in a day. They could just sort of quickly get around, 500 pictures and bang, off they go. So it's sort of, I guess it depends what you want to experience, what you want to explore when you're traveling.
Actually, one of my favorite things to do is, I don't know if Venice this would exactly correlate to Venice, but is just to walk through cities. Like I've been to Rome, for example, and I went to all the kind of major attractions that most people would go to if they had a small amount of time in Rome. But one day we took actually an underground train from where we were staying across the city to the Vatican. And after we finished everything up there, I was like, I don't want to take the underground train back to the hotel. So I looked up how long it was to walk, and it was like 2 hours or something. But the route was like, I mean, you know how the streets are in Rome. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to them at all. And I was like, perfect. Even if it takes me 4 hours to get back there, I'm going to just walk through the streets of Rome. And that was actually the most memorable part of that entire trip for me.
Yeah, there's loads of like Rome. You can just, it doesn't matter what direction you're looking at. There's just always something somewhere. We did a tour, sort of a tour. A friend of ours that lives in Rome was meant to be giving us a tour, and then an English friend that was with us had done a tour in the past that was like an actual proper tour. And so there was myself and another friend that was sort of there, and he was feeding us information. So we'd arrive at like a statue and we knew everything about it. And the person that lived in Rome had no clue. They were like, oh yeah, this is like, oh, who's that? Like, yeah, I think it's one of the, and then I'd like lean over to, isn't that the goddess Nike? And you're like, yeah. In fact, you can see the art. That's where the tick comes from in the shoe. And you're like, oh yeah. Oh, how do you know all this? Like, well, we're just, well-traveled, very experienced people, aren't we? But no. Leah, you've traveled as well, not quite as far afield, I think, as Brian these days. But I saw you at FitFest.
Yeah.
I saw you at Throwdown.
Yes.
I know you're at Euro Champs.
I am. Yeah. Keep out and about. My favorite thing to do now, actually, when I'm abroad, which one day will be CrossFit, but is a walking food tour. So next time you've got a half a day, Brian, that is something I would recommend, because you get to see the city and get all the food.
Perfect. I'll check that out.
It's a
is it like, can you like search walking food tour and then enter a city name? And
yeah, and there's hundreds. I discovered them last year when I was in the States, actually. And
really?
Now whenever I'm in a new city, it's like my go-to thing, because you get everything included. It's great. Or a cocktail food tour, also very recommended.
I look forward to seeing your open score next year, Brian. Just seeing if all these walking food tours and cocktail tours have impacted your fitness in any way.
No, the travel's already impacted my fitness. This is the worst I've done in the open, maybe since the second year I ever did it. I mean, when you're living out of a hotel 3 out of 4 weeks of the year, I did the first open workout in Riyadh after 3 full days of competition, where, I mean, we're getting there at 7 a.m., we're leaving at 8 p.m., and the competition is feeding us donuts and coffee, shawarma, McDonald's, Subway, pizza. And it's like, you got to eat. I'm not just not going to eat, but I'm working. And then whatever, I did the workout and it hurt.
Yeah. I think it hurt everyone though, but yeah, maybe some more than others. So it's interesting. Okay. See, I'm trying to not ask the obvious questions, Brian, because you dangled a carrot like earlier on about something we could talk about, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Sam says that comes. It sounds dreamy. So there we go. Also, what's going on with the Turkish bathhouse then? Is there a story there?
Well, not really. I mean, there's a guy that trains at the gym in Charlotte here that I coach at, and he has been to Istanbul a couple times for work, and he told me, he's like, there's a million things to do, but if you have the chance, go to the Turkish bathhouse. It's worth the experience. Well, he didn't specifically tell me of a Turkish bathhouse that he had a good experience at or not. So I'm just kind of like, I searched Turkish bathhouse, and of course, there's like a million of them. So how do you know which one to pick? I read a couple reviews, whatever. There's only a few that are within walking distance. And I did one of these things where I just kind of wandered around the city and wanted to see the university. And there was one close by Istanbul University. So I went there, and you walk in and, there's like a menu of options, and I don't know what to pick. So I just picked one. And it was, I mean, if there's I think probably he's giving me a hard time because of the picture I put on Instagram, but I didn't know what I was getting into. I stayed there for a couple hours. They did all these different variety of things. And then at the very end of it, he like dresses me in these like towels. And I was walking back to the like common area where the last thing you do is you have some tea, Turkish tea. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I hadn't thought about taking a picture the entire time I was there. The phone's like locked in a cubby or something. I immediately went to get to my phone. I was like, I don't know if I'll post this publicly or not, but at least a few people need to see this. And then when I was looking back on all the pictures of the trip, I was like, I should just put it out there. It's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, that's culture, right?
That was the idea. Of course, when you talk to the people from Turkey, most of them, and this is the case with a lot of places that you go, as you were referencing with your friend from Rome, if you don't have a friend in town, a lot of times you won't do the things that people would normally come to your part of the world to do. And like the people that I was working with at the competition the next day, I told him I went to Turkish bathhouse. He's like, oh man, like, yeah, we don't really do that though. Like I've probably been to Turkish bathhouse like 4 times in my life and I'm 35. That's what he told me. And I was like, oh, I've been there once and I'm 36.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was thinking about, I don't know why I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about like tourist traps and things that people like, you go places and like, no, but that's, that's really touristy. And it's kind of like, yeah, but it must be touristy for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like there must be a reason that people keep going there. Otherwise they wouldn't bother. I do understand it to a degree because, again, like working in Venice, you knew the places that were like prices were just marked up for tourists, or the little, like the little things they would do. Like even I remember a friend of mine telling me that they went for a coffee in London in like an Italian, cafe. And generally in Italy, when you go for a coffee, it's quick. You go in, you order an espresso, you stand at the counter, they give it to you, you drink it, you give them €1 and you go out. Like that's it. And only if you're going there to chat with someone will you kind of go and sit down at a table. So they'd like ordered a coffee and just drank it at the counter, and the person was like, "Oh, you're from Italy," because that's the way. In England, that's not how we do it. But usually, if you sit at the table, quite often there'll be a cover charge, and it'll be like €1. So you pay, your coffee's €1, the other person's coffee is €1 for the table, €3. There you go. In Venice, a lot of places put it €1 on each item. So if you order and they do these like little sandwiches called tormazzini that are invented in Venice. So maybe you order like 3 of them because they're just sort of a small sandwich. So like 3 little sandwiches, a couple of coffees, and suddenly it's, €5-6 more than if you'd stood at the counter and drank it and ate it. There's a little travel tip for you if you're going to any competitions in Italy this year.
Yeah.
Right. I've got one planned for Milan. I'm going to go back there and after Dubai again. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I probably am getting, I don't know what you call ripped off or wasting some money in every country I go to just by not knowing certain little things like that. But
anyway, but it's the life experience, and can we really put a price on that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's €3 apparently. Oh, what's this? There you go. Well, Barclay, I try. I try to bring something. I can't bring the
Okay.
stats and the knowledge of CrossFit that Brian has. I can just bring a little bit of, a little bit of flavor. So I guess I was interested though, like CrossFit in general when you're traveling. Like what are you experiencing? Because I think here we're seeing, like Leah's going to loads of competitions because they're just constantly like smaller competitions or even bigger competitions just popping up all over the place, because it seems, at least like in the UK, people just want to keep doing CrossFit and they want to compete and they want to throw down even if they're not going to kind of the bigger comps. And I, but then you hear, and I'm going to say more from America, this kind of idea of like, CrossFit is dying and it's, nobody, it's all kind of doom and gloom. But I find when you look at sort of Europe, it seems to be booming. You, I suppose, have quite a kind of global outlook traveling as you do for CrossFit. I mean, do you want to weigh in on this discussion of is CrossFit dying?
I mean, one of the main reasons that I go to these competitions is to give a spotlight to the fact that they're happening. And that spotlight is usually highlighting the elite, pro, RX, whatever the top division is called at those competitions, because quite frankly, it's not very reasonable for me to stream every heat of every division all day long, especially when I don't know any of the people that are competing there. And that's on two fronts. Is one, it's just, it's actually quite challenging to do what I do. I'm, in bringing these live streams now, I'm the camera operator, I'm the director, I'm choosing the graphics. Sometimes I'm doing the color commentary, the play-by-play. I'm on the field of play, making sure not to get in the way of the athletes, judges, equipment, etc., and trying to tell the story as best as I can about what's happening there throughout the entire weekend. That takes a lot of energy, anyway. But additionally, when I'm not doing that, it gives me the opportunity to go and interact with the community that's involved in the competition. So this competition I went to in Saudi Arabia, I was streaming the elite individual heats, but there were close to 1,000 athletes from over 60 different nations competing. The following weekend, I'm in Istanbul for a kind of a new competition. It's the competition organizers have run a version of it before, but the Eurasian Throwdown in Istanbul, Turkey. It's the first year that it's ran as that title in that city. Nearly 500 athletes from about 50 different nations. In the last 4 competitions that I did before the Open this year, it was Wodapalooza. Everyone knows that that's got 2,000 athletes from however many different places. But then I did 2 other competitions the next 2 weekends that had over 1,100. It was like 1,100 and 1,400 athletes competing. And then I went to Spain for Pamplona Arena Games, and they had 1,000 athletes competing there. And it's like, over the course of these 6 competitions that I've done in 4 different countries, you're averaging at least 1,000 athletes competing at each one of them, and a lot of athletes that are traveling internationally or in the States, which is a very different, if you counted every state as a country, then there's a lot of different states represented instead of countries, just because the geography, the map's laid out differently. So the fact that from the community level, whatever you call that, all the way up to the elite level and teams and with masters and teenagers, people are showing up to compete in these competitions regularly. And everybody who's ever run a competition knows that there's a massive degree of turnover. You're not going to get the same 1,000 people one year to the next year. For example, one of those competitions, the Fittest of the Coast in South Carolina, this was their 5th year, and I think they featured 20 athletes that have competed at all 5 events. They had like 1,400 athletes there.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot of turnover. So there's still people that are coming out of the woodworks wanting to do this thing. And for me, if you or I, any person is going to put something on a calendar, it could be our wedding, it could be a spring break, it could be a presentation at work, it could be a marathon, an Ironman, a CrossFit competition. Suddenly you have goals surrounding that event, and you're going to make lifestyle choices that are going to make you be as prepared as possible to deliver on that day. Whether you want to fit into your tux, look good in the bikini, have a perfect presentation for your boss, or do your best on a series of workouts, you're going to make different choices leading up to that. And in the case of CrossFit, probably you're going to eat a little better, train a little bit more intelligently or more often, sleep a little more if you can, and especially leading up to it the week of. And whoever has tried to instill a positive habit in their life knows that that takes time. So I think competitions are incredibly healthy for the common person. Forget about the elite, because you put something on the calendar, you're more likely to eat a little better, sleep a little better, drink a little bit less alcohol, more water, whatever it is. And these changes have the potential, because of that competition. Not obviously you're already training to some extent in an affiliate or in your garage or whatever, but those disciplines that you might just change for that could potentially remain as lifestyle choices that you make after the competition. And now you're talking about a potentially much more successful version of low trajectory to a distant horizon for healthier and fitter humans for a lifetime.
And I that's why I think the open is still so like important, being, bringing in the community. And for that reason is, I look at CrossFit Bath, for example, and I'm like, wow, I see the people that go to competitions, and I see the people that will never go to a competition. That's just not why they do CrossFit. But they're signed up for the open, they'll do the open, and it gives them that sort of that bit more accountability. They're not like the Friday morning class was always packed, whereas some Fridays, less people are there. I mean, for me, quite
never
often
miss a Friday. That's not a thing.
Well, ours is never miss a Monday. More
Everyone's is never miss a Monday,
yeah.
But we should change it.
We should. I like Friday because that's the Friday morning is the only day I can go at the same time as my wife. So that's like Friday morning we go and do the 9:30 class together, because the only day we're both not working in the morning. But I quite often train at 8 p.m. and it's exactly that thing of like, if I know I'm going in at 8 p.m. in the evening, I need to think from the morning till the evening, like, do I really want to eat this knowing that later I'm going to be in the gym? Do I really want to drink this knowing that later I've got the workout? And that just keeps me, and then 8 o'clock I've done the workout, I've got home, and I'm like, well, now I don't want to eat anything or drink, I just want to go to bed. So it's sort of, it just keeps me accountable. Whereas I know, speaking of Ollie, he likes to train early in the morning, and then and for him it's the same thing. It's like, oh, I've done the training, so now I'm dialed in on like being healthy and fit that day. Whereas I think I would be the opposite. I'd be like, well, I've done the training, now I've earned whatever terrible thing I want to have. Yeah,
whatever. I think with comps as well, it's not even just the people competing, like the volunteers and everyone that comes out and judges. Like, people make it such a huge part of their lives that they will literally be, I see the same judges at 90% of comps I do, like over and over again. It's such, like, I think anyone who maybe doesn't experience community in their box, like most people do, but if they don't, people find that at comps, and among them volunteers and the competitors as well. So even if it's not like a motivational thing, people have it as like, right, that's my social weekend done, because they know they're gonna see friends from all over the country or all over the world and like connect at all these different competitions.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I still find it fascinating how many people are willing to, which sounds stupid because also we willingly give up our time and go and stuff, but the amount of people that are willing to go and give up their time to judge, to move equipment, to do all of that. I mean, like, none of these comps would run without that. I mean, I'm curious to know if some of these other comps that you've gone to, Brian, if that is an issue with having volunteers, because I guess, that's like one of the benefits of having, lots of boxes full of members, full of people that want to go and be at these comps anyway and are happy to go and volunteer. I don't know how that's translating kind of globally, but
sometimes there are problems with that. It seems like usually it's pretty well taken care of, but there's been a competition or two that I've stepped in and judged for a couple of heats, just because it was, or whatever happened. And it's really hard for competitions because they have a process, whatever their process is for putting out an application for volunteering. And then they're, they'll fill all those things. But then at that point, they're just hoping that the people show up. And then if they show up on day one, there's no guarantee that they're going to show up on day two. And, there's been this, I think, thing in the past where it's like, well, everyone showed up on day one and got their shoes, and then they just left after the day because they got their shoes and they weren't getting anything on day two. And it's like, damn, and then people would say like, oh, we're going to give you your stuff at the end of the weekend so that, you don't just do that to us. So it's like, I think it's always a stressful situation, but quite frankly, in CrossFit, at least it's even similar with the athletes. All the athletes can sign up and register and whatever, but there's nothing that's holding any athlete, no matter how big or small, really accountable to actually showing up and competing. You're just hoping that they do.
Yeah. I think with the shoes, probably the solution is give them like the right shoe on Saturday and then the left on Sunday, and you're sort of like, there you go. But no, I mean, I was speaking to, maybe it was Rich Hornsey. It was someone who was running a lot of comps, but they were saying that they'd really noticed sort of after the whole COVID thing, people suddenly felt much freer to just cancel last minute, whereas sort of pre that, kind of once you made an arrangement, you had an arrangement, whereas now it became quite kind of I think it just became easier in life to just sort of say, oh, sorry, we can't do that now, and people just kind of had to accept it, because quite often it would be like, oh, we're going to do this thing, oh, so sorry, I've come into contact with someone that has COVID, so I'm not allowed now. And then that just sort of bled through into just people being like, oh, actually I could just say I don't want to do something now, and I don't have to do it. So yeah. And I like this guy, very good, laces in the podium. There you go. That's how you make sure the athletes come back.
Yeah.
Anyway,
here's one thing I was going to say about Brian, what you mentioned about the Sunday kind of lull. It really pains me, because the lack of people that stay for podiums really makes me sad about a lot of competitions, because these guys are getting their moment and they've worked all weekend and they've waited, and everyone just leaves and goes
Yeah,
home.
but I actually I wrote about this after I did 20 stops from the games until, I don't know, beginning of February, and then I just kind of did a recap where I wrote about 7 big picture lessons that I learned on the road. And I think that is on the competition, and I think that the competitions have chosen to do award ceremonies in a way that is not helping the athletes in any way, shape, or form. If you have a competition that has more than, I'll say more than 3 or 5 divisions in it, you should be setting up a system. I believe you should be setting up a system where, as the divisions are finishing, that their podiums are happening 30 minutes later, so you still have enough time to review at a place that's not on the competition floor, so that all of the people that care about that group of people can go celebrate them, get their pictures, get their prizes, get their checks, whatever it is, and be done with their day. Because there's so many times that competitions are ending for certain divisions at noon on a Sunday, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, but the podium ceremony for all divisions is until 7 p.m. And it's absolutely crazy and insane. And competition organizers, I think in general, can be a lot better about just making a schedule and communicating that schedule. So, but the problem is that the only way that people have learned how to do these things is from CrossFit. But you should not be learning from CrossFit, because CrossFit Games season is completely different than the type of competition that you're running. And they have actually proven to be worse than everyone else in terms of forward planning for those things. Most competitions are now getting ahead of that, where people are announcing their dates more than a year ahead of time. Whereas with CrossFit, we never really know. So just take that as a point of reference, that the way that they're done at the CrossFit Games award ceremonies is not the way that you need to do them. And that can be extrapolated to a variety of different things, whether it's how you brief your athletes. You don't actually have to have athlete briefings that take an hour long. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of other ways that you can do it that are far more efficient for everybody that's involved. But if you've only looked at that as the model, then you're missing out. And if you want to have a better understanding of different ways to do it, you should be paying attention to what I'm doing, because I'm talking about this stuff regularly. And if you have curiosity about the way that it's happening somewhere, then reach out to those people. Competition organizers, best friends, or other competition organizers. Those are great resources. I can go there and I can talk a little bit about what's going on, but I'm never going to know, I'm trying to taking the best and the worst from everywhere and moving on. I'm not an expert in that. I just have a lot of experience in that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's the same philosophy that they were talking about, how boxes aren't necessarily competing with each other. If you can get more people doing something across the board, you can actually learn from each other, you can help each other, you can share, and you can all benefit. Yeah, with competitions, it should be the same, right? There's going to be things that, even because sometimes you might have a brilliant idea, and it's good to sound it off against someone else and say like, oh, I've thought about doing this, and they might say, yeah, actually, we tried that. This is what happened. So you obviously you can then still go away and try it. But if they can tell you exactly, well, we did this, this is the result, this is why we stopped doing it that way, then there you go. Decker and Hyrox do podiums throughout the day.
That's exactly how CrossFit competition should do it.
Yeah.
Because look, even if you have everybody who stays that's involved in the podium ceremony, as soon as their division's done, they leave.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has the elite go last. And by the time that the elite go, there's the least applause. There's the least amount of people left, because most of the people who've bothered to stay till 6 p.m. for your award ceremony are just parents, friends, coaches, the person who drove up in the car with them, and none of them want to be there. As soon as they got their stuff, they're gone. They already know who won the competition, or they'll just check in the car ride home.
Yeah.
If you want to have the best amount of participation for the elite ceremony, do it the same way. All the other ones should be done. Everyone who came to watch the elites is already going to say, and if they know that in the case of the elites, because there's nothing else left to do, they're going to have this award ceremony potentially within 10 minutes of them finishing. Well, they might, 50% of the fans, I'll stay an extra 10 minutes and watch the award ceremony, get a picture with them. Who knows? Maybe the athletes will come by and give me a high five. But if the award ceremony is starting 30 minutes after their heat ends, and there's 35 divisions to go through before they get to them, no, I'm going home and having dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as well, like what kind of, how did your weekend go? Like if you were in the first heat and there's 4 heats, and so you finished that final heat, like that first heat of the final event, there's still 3 more heats to go, and you were expecting to be in that final heat, and you've had a bad weekend. Like, are you sticking around now to watch other people be awarded what you maybe thought you might be in striking distance of? I don't know. Okay, interesting. That is, like you say something, then you start thinking, what?
Ignore.
Oh, is that just the go-to now for Heidi to ignore?
No, not Heidi. The question. She's asking about a person that probably doesn't know this podcast is happening, which is why she's not blowing up the chats.
She's here.
She is here. Okay. There she is.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this. So how do we talk about this, Brian? So I messaged you and invited you to come on, and you said you've been waiting, which I really appreciated, because so I still think that I speak into the void a lot of the time. So if I say, and this is sort of what I was saying to you as well about being a bit nervous about going live, is kind of going live and nobody listening, and then you're like, at least once I've pre-recorded and I upload it, I can walk away and I don't need to see what's going on. But when you're there live and it's like, oh wow, nobody cared, that hurts. But anyway, the comments now, I'm trying to not look at them. It's the other reason why I don't like live. But yeah, you were anyway. I reached out to you, and you sort of said, "Oh, been waiting, great." And I said, "Well, it was a matter of kind of when, not if, I would ask." And then you were just sort of saying that you were kind of obviously. So I don't really know what's happened, but I'd noticed your absence from certain places that I used to see you, and you don't necessarily have to go into like specifics on kind of what happened there if you don't want to. I know people were. I did hear you after we'd booked for you to come on. I listened to your episode on Around the Whiteboard. So I noticed that people had been putting questions in on there asking for, what was going on. Actually, I have to thank you for dropping out due to scheduling on a previous Around the Whiteboard. I managed to sneak into your spot, and that went really well for me.
Yeah, it was an honor to have you, I guess, in my place, so to speak. You did excellently, and I think you got whatever round you ended up getting eliminated in. I think you got a little bit short end of the stick on your points there. as well. But it's ultimately Peter's show, so he can award points however he wants. And
well,
even
both
if
you, I, and John Young feel that way, but that's besides the point.
no, I mean, I actually studied his point, the way that he gives points out. I really wanted to win that, and I ended up being able to talk about what was going on with Nico and whatever. Anyway, but I was studying how to get points. I was like, okay, I'm going to craft answers that are in the line of what he usually gives points for. And then I gave one of the answers off the bat. Elliot Simmons had literally nothing to say. He got 1 point and I got 2. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not winning this no matter how good my answers are.
I mean, that amazes me that you've studied it to that degree, but I understand why you wanted to win. You had a very important.
Well, it was like a synchronous. Of course, if I'm going to go there, I'm going to try to put forth good answers, but I didn't really care about if I won or not. But the synchronicity of the way that, or the timing of the way things happened, was that he sent the topics. I kind of looked at them and I was like, well, quite frankly, I was like, these are kind of pathetic topics in my opinion. What was 24.2? What is 24.3? Is Sevan good for CrossFit? I was like, oh my gosh. The next 5 minutes, I get a message from a friend of mine about a friend of theirs who's a judge who has a child who's 3 years old who needs a liver replacement and has this pretty rare and unique condition. And I was like, oh, well, I know on Peter's show that if you win, you get 30 seconds to talk about it. And probably that's going to be a better forum to get this information out to the people who are most likely to do something about it than even reposting on my own personal Instagram or something like that. Or even talking on my own podcast, which doesn't get a lot of views these days for maybe reasons that I'm about to tell you about. So anyway, I was like, okay. So I immediately looked at the questions more seriously, kind of put down my original thoughts for ideas. And then I have watched maybe half of the episodes that he's done, but I never really watched them with the intent of, I had some vague ideas. So then I started watching and I was specifically scrolling through to the points where he would give points away, because he only does it after all 3 people have spoken. And in some of the episodes, he'll specifically say, ooh, Jason, I really like the facts that you gave here about this and this, that I gave you 2 extra points for those stats, and whatever. So I started picking up on some tendencies of his and I tried to play to those.
Yeah. He's an unpredictable guy. This is the problem.
You can count on a couple of things. You can count on a fake news once a week and 100 burpees a day.
Yeah. He's like CrossFit. He says, it's my show, my rules. I do what I want. So it's exactly the same. You should be ready for that. And I feel bad now because I used my 30 seconds to self-promote and just beg for a sponsor that I then got. So it was worth it.
Don't feel bad.
It was definitely worth it. Thank you, Rising Tide, for sponsoring the UK tour. Really appreciate it.
Pretty sure that I know the girl who's behind that, and she's a pretty cool person.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, we might be thinking of different people, but I'm pretty sure we're thinking of the same person. So, okay. Oda said that you're never absent from their heart, so that's nice. But so what do you want to share about what happened, Brian? What's going on? Why have I not seen you apart from on your?
Well, I mean,
on your stuff.
I would say that 99% of people who are familiar with who I am probably either first saw me because they read the Morning Chalk Up, and I wrote for them for 3 years. They are a fan of Talking Elite Fitness, who I was on episodes of theirs for a long time. We used to do a show called The Numbers Game in 2018, 19, maybe into 20. I used to be on Get With the Programming quite a bit. And then whether you were watching if you were watching the CrossFit podcast back in 2018, you would have seen me and Sevan do shows together, a few shows, probably 10 or 12 over the course of the regionals, 2 weeks of regionals. We were going to do them at the games. It ended up getting canceled the day before I went up there. And then for the most part, I didn't hear from Sevan for a while. We saw each other a couple of times over the next year, and then I didn't hear from him for a couple of years. And when Souza reached out to him to get the podcast going again, he called me and asked me to do it with him. And that was quite surprising, but I was really happy to do that with him, because he and I had a very natural chemistry on air, I think most people thought that. So I started doing podcasts with him again and did that for basically all the way up until sometime last year, maybe May, June, it started tapering off. And then by, since November, I haven't even had a chance to have a phone call conversation with him. But still, if I go to competitions, people will, especially international competitions, oh yeah, from the Sevan podcast. Like that's where people know me from. I've been on tons of different podcasts. I've written for a lot of different publications within CrossFit. I've worked at tons of different CrossFit events in season and out of season. But if you're like have been following along over the past, especially 4, 5, 6 months, I would, and I don't consume all of these things, but I would say that it's very rare to ever that you will see me or even hear a mention of me on anything that Morning Chalk Up is producing, anything that Talking Elite Fitness is talking about. Get with the programming, Barbell Spin, Sevan podcast. The place you'll probably see me come up the most is with Andrew Hiller or Peter Coffey and Pods and Wads, but they're usually either attacking my character or my business, making fun of me. I don't know if it's a serious thing or just in jest and satire half the time. And outside of that, none of those entities or CrossFit are actually promoting in any way what I'm doing, which is something that nobody else, as far as I know, has ever done in the history of this sport and community, which is traveling the world and learning about the international sport of CrossFit from the community to the elite level and documenting it. It's something that I think has incredible value, is very much in alignment with specifically what Sevan, as the self-proclaimed CEO of CrossFit, would want to be promoting. Something that I think has immense value to the CrossFit Games across the board, not even just with their games team, but with their affiliates team, with their training department. Like the things that you see when you're out there in all these different places is pretty noticeable. I mean, one of the 7 things that I wrote about after going to 20 stops is please squat lower. I mean, it is ridiculous how many people think that they're squatting below parallel and are not, and are even in competitions are just permitted to do it no matter what. But I'm also talking about at affiliates and whatever. It's just like, forget about competition. The healthy hip function of being able to go below parallel and stand up and open your hips completely is something every person who's been exposed to this should want to be able to do every chance that they get, so that they reduce the chance of having to have a hip replacement when they're 50, 60, 70, or 80 years old. And yet all around the world, people are shorting their squats on both ends. So that's something that's obviously not specific to competition, but I think would be valuable feedback for CrossFit in general. Anyways, none of these people are talking about me. They're doing shows that are talking about topics that I've written about and talked about for years, but they won't invite me to be guests on them. And they've just kind of on all sides. And sure, someone could say, and Andrew would say, that this is my fault. But they've kind of excommunicated me and blocked me off. And in some cases, I really don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, Leah, you're familiar with Brian before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Surely.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
where did you first? Because I think I probably first heard you, Brian, on. Yeah, it was. I think I heard you a little bit on like Talking Elite Fitness, but then I think the main thing you were doing was like behind the paywall initially.
Yeah, the numbers game was all behind the paywall. Yeah.
So I would hear kind of clips from that or little bits of that, and that's maybe where I sort of first heard about it, which was, I mean, that predated you being on Sevan. And then, I didn't ever really look too closely at what Morning Chalk Up was, the byline or who had written stuff or all that at the time. So that's, yeah. But what about you, Leah? Where did you first hear of Brian Friend?
Talking Elite Fitness as well. And I think weirdly it's hard to picture, because I feel like I've just always known your name from like the minute I started CrossFit and started like looking into it and being interested in it. It was one of them names that I just always knew. So probably, yeah, all them things you've mentioned, all of it, but definitely Talking Elite Fitness for sure.
But also you've got a great name. I mean, it's a good name for this. Yeah. I used to know a guy. I still know a guy. There's a podcaster I know, and his name was Phil Better. Phil Phil, and then Better. And I think actually his actual surname is French, but it's translated into Better. So he had the Phil Better Show. Like it was just perfect. Like you couldn't have asked for a better name until I met Brian Friend. So I you know, as I've said on here and in videos, like I'm not in any of the inner circles. I'm kind of adjacent to some of them. I hear little bits and pieces here and there. So I haven't heard kind of what has actually happened or what has caused any rift. And I obviously noticed that you know, I guess maybe, you know, as you said, like Hiller had mentioned things and Peter would mention things, and it was a little bit more obvious on that side of the media. But I had no idea, like Morning Chalk Up or Talking Elite Fitness or any of those also weren't really involved with you. The one that would maybe surprise me the most, because I could say with any, you know, I could understand that the independent people, independent media teams could have, you know, their own agendas or whatever, or, you know, feel that you're competition or that you've done something to them or whatever it may be. But and then so I can't look at comments. And then but it's CrossFit themselves that is the one probably that you've just mentioned that would surprise me the most, because I would think they surely, you know, would want to be kind of impartial in promoting different people's stuff, especially if, but I mean, they don't really promote anybody's stuff much, do they? They're a bit.
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about it. You know, they have promoted Craig Ritchie and Savan and Buttery Bros behind the scenes stuff, but those are three people that are producing different versions of the same thing. None, and all of them are pertaining to the same group of athletes that everyone already knows about. And I actually spoke with some people within CrossFit when I was in Nashville this past week about I just kind of suggested the thought of, what if you promoted like the world tour that I'm on, and the fact that there's actually an opportunity for people to watch CrossFit at all these different places throughout the year. One of the biggest perks for me as a fan of disc golf is that I can watch it live or post-produced from beginning of February until end of October. And then during the months that there's not live competitions happening, what these post-production companies do is they can like smaller competitions, and then they release them in November, December, and January. So there's still content that's fresh for me, because unless you go travel to these whatever places to watch them, you're never going to see them. There's still fresh disc golf competition for me to watch during those down times or the off season for them, where you can start to learn about, instead of just continuously learning about the same 10, 20 athletes, you can learn about more and more athletes. I could sit here and list 100 professional disc golfers to you right now. No one would want me to do that. But the point is, because of the way that the content is distributed throughout the year and available, because the Disc Golf Network and the PDGA, Professional Disc Golf Association, are promoting all of the coverage of this stuff, that casual fans like me become exposed to more and more people, and therefore have more and more storylines to follow and are more invested in the sport. And since, like I said, I don't think anyone has ever done what I'm doing before, it does seem like something that CrossFit could potentially take note of and start to promote on their channels, which obviously have a much more massive reach, with the end goal of all of those things that I just said about disc golf hopefully happening for CrossFit.
Yeah. You know what? And this is the other problem of being live, Brian, is that I'm thinking about things that I've been told recently, and then I'm thinking, can I even say that? Because once it's out, it's out, and it's, you know, it's like, yeah. But I've some decisions that CrossFit have made recently with regards to their media seem very short-sighted to me. Things that I've heard that they've done, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't, like, I understand the optics that you're going for, but I think it's, you know, it's short-sighted, and actually if you'd done something else, maybe, you know, one thing wouldn't look as impressive, but globally it would be more beneficial to CrossFit as a whole. But I'm not, I can't say what it is. But maybe I'll do a video on it if I find out that I can talk about it, or basically if I can find, well, if I can find it, if I can't find things that were maybe produced last year around the Open that this year are missing, then that's, you know, that's public knowledge. Everybody can go and find that stuff, and then I can feel free to talk about it, and no one needs to know where I heard it. So stay tuned. But
I mean, I would just say, I have no idea what you're talking about, but a very simple thing to me is, the winners of every workouts video should just be re-promoted by CrossFit. Everyone will watch those. I don't know why
Yeah.
why there's any needs to be any secrecy. If they're, especially, we can clearly see that if they're winning the workout, then their their videos are being reviewed to a high level of scrutiny. So there shouldn't be anything to hide there. It's just an opportunity to watch the best person, male and female, in the world do something better than the rest of the 160,000 men and women that tried to do it were able to do it. Why wouldn't we want to watch that? Why wouldn't you want to put that out there and get the 100,000 views or whatever?
Yeah. And then, I mean, they can even, it's, I mean, CrossFit have the power to even be like, this is the verified video, like you can submit your video, but your video has not yet been reviewed by us. But when we put it up on our channel as the fastest time, this is the fastest time as officially recognized by, it has a bit more power to it than just the athlete posting their video and being like, oh, look what I got, because all of the, always all these scores are kind of hypothetical until they've been reviewed and CrossFit has said, yes, we're going to give you that, or no, we're going to give you a penalty and whatever. So they do have, you're right. They could post it up, but they could even post it up and add their own little bit of sort of authenticity to the video to kind of drive more engagement to watch that version of it, because that's the one that's been approved, sort of thing. But okay, it's another thing to add to the pile. Let's just add.
I always find it interesting as well, and it happens at this time of year with the Open, but they'll share kind of like mini stories of quote unquote ordinary people doing CrossFit, or people that have really fascinating stories. But there are so many of them, and I assume, like Brian, you'll see them so much at so many competitions all over, but they seem to be really rare, almost, these videos and these stories that they share. And it's just when they're almost trying to promote something like the Open. I don't know if that's just me kind of observing that, but that's kind of how it seems sometimes.
I'm sorry, what was the conclusion there?
So like I always find it interesting as to when they choose to promote like the quote unquote ordinary people or stories of CrossFit, because there's no consistency to it. They're quite random, but it's like this time of year we see loads of it because it's the Open. But actually that happens throughout the year. And I'm sure you see that so much at all the different competitions that you go to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, you're averaging 1,000 people at 6 different competitions in 4 different countries. How many of those are elite athletes that are pursuing this as a profession? It's a very small number. The rest of them are just varying degrees of people with experience and commitment to this thing that we've all kind of gravitated to.
So Heidi's asking why I would censor myself on my own podcast. And it's because I have to remember that people will listen to this. And I would like the people that occasionally give me bits of information continue to give me those bits of information, and trust that maybe then I can go off and do some digging on my own and not just, sometimes when you know stuff, it's kind of, it only takes a few steps to work out who told you something. And sometimes you can go and find the same information sort of in another way, and then you're a little bit freer to talk about it, or at least to even clarify that it is true before you start making.
And not everyone is sensitive to that, Jason. So maybe Heidi listens to some other shows that have less censorship.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I like censorship as the word, because it feels like, and I'm like, I don't think it's that it's being censored. It's just, I'm just waiting. I'm just, fact checking.
No, what you're doing makes total sense. That's how we operate too. That's why we haven't done our Open review show yet. Well, we try to give it a little bit extra time. We still want it to be relevant, but we want to have an opportunity to ask certain questions of CrossFit and get responses back. Sometimes the responses are, we won't have that information, but at least we've made an effort to ask. So makes sense to me.
He's loving that he's invented this new word, adjacent, and he's going to use it as much as he can. I appreciate that. Do CrossFit get back to you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. So at least that,
I wrote him a question. We'll do our 24.3 review show in I think it's 26 hours from now. I had a couple specific questions. I emailed them around, 10 a.m. this morning, and responded at 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Okay, I guess that's pretty good for CrossFit. I'm still waiting on the response to some things I've sent them.
Yeah, but this is like, I've been establishing they have established a protocol of the way that they want that kind of communication to be done from media outlets, for lack of a better term, and we've adhered to it. So I am regularly sending questions to the correct channels I've been directed to send questions to, and I wait for those responses. And when I get those responses, I don't always broadcast them out to the world. Then I decide how I want to interact with whatever the information is that I got that I think is going to be best on two fronts. And it's one of the things that you already said, which is I still want to be able to have access to that information and get it in the future because it can be valuable. And secondarily is to consider what, there's a lot of times that I find something out and I'm like, man, that's actually amazing. And that makes me feel a lot better about the situation. But I know that I can't say that publicly or I'll never get access to the information again. So I have to think about what is the best way for me to frame this so that I can still project the feeling that actually CrossFit is making the decision that they either need to make or the best decision that they can given the circumstances that they're in. And we just have to kind of accept the fact that we don't know all of the circumstances that they're in. Because otherwise it's very easy to look from the outside, see something, not like it, disagree with it, and then make all these wild claims about why it should be different and how it could be better. And actually, the people who come to your mind that are most likely to do that, before any of them were doing that, I was doing that. It's just I wasn't as loud about it. I didn't have as big of a following at that time. And I usually went about it in a little bit more of a scientific way, but I was certainly being hyperly critical of the way that CrossFit, specifically the CrossFit Games team, was doing things during the years of 2019, 20, and 21 to a high degree. You could probably, if you're good at searching through the internet, go back and find some of those things. There are a lot of the same issues that are being talked about today, but I decided to abandon that strategy and to embrace a different strategy, which was to try to work with them to have as good of understanding as possible, and then try to communicate to the public that want to listen to me, which obviously none of them have to, things that would hopefully help to kind of quell the storm, because it can be infuriating with a lack of information, some of the things that they do.
Yes, it can, definitely. Yeah, I mean, well, that's, I'm with you on that, because I kind of built my whole thing on just trying to gather as much information as possible and say, look, here's all the information, and go away and form your own opinion. But at least now you have all the information and not just, maybe part of the information that kind of leads you to a certain conclusion that most will have.
The bad news for you and me is that there's a lot less people that are interested in consuming that kind of information.
I know. I mean, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and that obviously, I find if I talk about a topic or if I speak about someone, quite often I'll get a message maybe from that person, or I'll hear from people involved, and it will always be quite positive and like, oh, actually, yeah, that was a good, very well balanced. Even if it is, maybe negative, it will be, yeah, very fair, very well balanced. Appreciate that kind of thing, which is great, and I value that, and I think that all I have going for me really is this reputation that if I speak about something, there's not a bias there, and I'm just giving you kind of this is what it is sort of thing. But that will never like really blow up the same way as something that's kind of rile people up, and that's not just within CrossFit. That's YouTube. That's a bad movie review will always do better than a review where you just say,
actually,
the movie was
it potentially could, because if you think about in other sports markets where there are some loud and boisterous personalities, they usually pair them in a show with someone who's more sensible.
There we go.
And then you have the back and forth. So you would imagine a scenario where you get the most loud and aggressive person in CrossFit giving a point of view, but it has to be in a controlled environment with you, where then you can say, totally makes sense. On the other side of things, I was also able to discover that this and this and this. And then you can go back and forth between not just one side of the conversation and another, but between one personality type and another, one way of presenting information and another. And that type of a show has found a lot of success in other sports.
There we go. I need to team up. That's what you're telling me. Oh dear. On occasion. Well, that's maybe what this is more for that, to be honest, this is where I can have back and forth with people. So that's nice. Okay. So the other problem of going live is I promised to start to keep these episodes short, and I've failed in the last couple of weeks. They just failed miserably. That I was like, I don't want them to be like an hour and a half long, because then people get bored and they go away. I want them to come back because they want more. And look at that, we're an hour and 5 already. So unbelievable. How did I want to wrap this up? Okay, that's interesting. I can't remember where I was going to go with the YouTube thing, but it is what it is. I'm happy to, I'm happy to have my reputation. I appreciate it. It's I kind of like stay forever, Brian. Okay. Oh well, we're here forever apparently. Oh well, Heidi's saying that's why Sivan and Brian were a good pair. There you go. Your point has been.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, many people have said it, and I kind of agree with it, that it's the best kind of combination that's ever existed in CrossFit. I think that's the reason why people everywhere I go, I say, "Hey, from the Sevan podcast, I love when you're on there with him." And I'm still hopeful that we can do it again sometime, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, that's because I think that one of the things that was always impressive, Brian, was how you were able to walk that line between all the because it does feel like there is sort of friction between different camps within CrossFit media. I think that's fair to say. Until you see people at competitions, and then everyone's friends.
Right.
It seems,
of course,
and then you'll go away to like your separate corners and. A bit like boxers or something. So there you go. But you were you could pop up on all the different shows, and it didn't seem strange that Brian's there. Whereas I think if certain other people had popped up on different shows, you'd have been like, oh really? That's interesting. But I guess
And now I'm on none of those.
No, none of them. So
I was about to say, has it done you well? Has it served you well?
Yes and no. I mean, I think there's a large piece of the puzzle that most are not accounting for, which is that during the majority of that time, I was coaching full time at a gym with a very good fixed salary, and then I was writing for the morning chalk up, and over a period of time, that came to be a pretty good salary as well. I got an offer from Bar Bend for a much better salary and opportunity, and I took it. 4 months later, they fired me and then sold their company. So then I was out one significant source of income. A month after that, I lost my job at the gym, and then I was out another significant source of income. And this was right on the precipice of starting my own business that I was not intending on starting as my sole source of income. In the meantime, because of what had happened with Bar Bend, Talking Elite Fitness had made me an offer that was it was 5 times better than what I was making with Sevan. I told Sevan about it. He said, I'm not going to pay you that much. And so I didn't really have much of a choice. Like, I was now suddenly in a situation where I'd lost nearly $90,000 worth of fixed income in 6 weeks. And I needed to make choices that were going to allow me to continue to pay bills and live and whatever. And I didn't know where that money was going to come from. And I kind of had to take what was available at the time. There were some people that helped me out substantially during that time. And, Sevan has his own reasons. And I think that in some parts, they're certainly valid for where he thinks that I have wronged him. But he did not help me during that time. He actually made it harder on me. And even, to this day, I'm feeling the impact of losing those streams of income and trying to, like I said a couple of times, I'm doing something that I don't think anyone else has done before. And there's a reason why they haven't done it before. It's really hard. It's really hard physically to do this much traveling. It's really hard in this economy to, not to mention that the world's economy is not great right now, but also just in the CrossFit ecosystem, to do this and make it your only source of income, and to have it be enough to kind of, how it is starting a business. Like, it takes time to make it profitable. Imagine now being in a situation where you don't have that luxury, and you thought that you did when you made all these plans to start it. So the reality of the situation in my life change dramatically. And, you know, people can say all they want, oh, he left for the money, It's like, I didn't really have a choice at that time. And, you know, things didn't work out the way that I wanted with Talking Elite Fitness either. So now I'm neither here nor there. And, you know, you said, has it worked out? Well, like, there are some opportunities that we're getting now specifically because we're not involved with either of those groups of people. You know, people will ask us, hey, are you working with Sevan? Are you working with Hiller? Are you working with Talking Elite Fitness? Are you working with Morning Chalk Up? Are you working with any other media outlet? And when the answer is no, they say, we have an opportunity for you. So for some reason, some of these people are wanting to come to us because we're not associated with those groups of people. I don't really love that either. You know, it's such a small space. Everyone's working really hard. It frustrates me that not everyone can get along, but it's humans. You know, that's how it is. And when there are a lot of people that want to, you know, to try to make this thing work, and there's not that much maybe to go around, you got to try to be creative and find different ways to do it. And, you know, I'm certainly guilty of it as much as the next person, but like, you know, the ego, the pride, the wanting to make the most for yourself, like all of those things are difficult things to navigate. And even when you don't necessarily want to be doing it with them, it can be difficult to avoid, you know, making a mistake here and there. So that's a little bit of the context that I think people are really missing when they're making, you know, quick to make judgments about me or the way that I've handled things in the last 9 months.
I think when people look from the outside as well, like, they see it through a different lens as well. So, you know, people have been saying, oh, I really liked listening to you and Sevan on the show together. Like, that was good. And so it's like, oh, now we don't get that thing that we liked. And, oh, you know, and then they start creating their own stories. And the example I can think of that it's sort of similar-ish was with like the Zach George thing and him kind of abandoning his team to go and do Gladiators. And you know, and people being like, oh, well, you know, they did so well in qualifying. And it's like, for some people, they were already at the games. It's like in their mind, oh, you know, he left that team and that team could have gone to the games. And it's like, yeah, well, yeah, they could have. They qualified for semifinals. And if they'd done well there, they could go to the games. But that's, you know, a big if. And even if they get to the games, how well then are they going to do at the games? How much is it going to cost them to travel to the games? How much potentially are they going to make from sponsors or, you know, prize money if they even, you know, were able to get prize money? And then he's got a new baby and it's like, he's got bills to pay and he's got things. And now you're given this opportunity to go on a show that is going to be and actually it's, you know, it's been coming out at the moment. It's on the BBC and it's huge. Like it's done way better than they imagined. And, you know, they're already prepping for the next season. And you're thinking, and, you know, I saw him at Strength in Depth Origins and he was like, you know, I'm talking to him after the final event. I'm like, how do you feel? He's like, you know, the body feel, you know, I'm getting older. It's harder to do this than it used to be, sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, you've done the smart move is going and having that stability and security for your family. But of course, if you're a friend of one of the other members of the team, or if you know, has bought your tickets to go to
everything you're saying is absolutely correct. The mistake that team made was not listing any alternates, period.
Yes.
Just, you should always have alternates on your team. You never know what's going to happen. And then it's not such a big deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think if you, I do also, you know, strongly think that even if you've signed NDAs and things like that, you can still be like, guys, you know, look how many teams have had injuries. Look how many teams have had this or that. We need to at least have someone. Otherwise, this ends, you know, prematurely. And in the back of the mind, you can be thinking, well, actually, also because maybe I'm not going to be there. But you don't need to say that. You can come up with another 20 different reasons why it would be a really, really, really good idea to have an alternate on the team. Anyway, but I'd love to talk to you about team structure for this year because I was speaking to someone that's on, you know, that's trying to qualify a team, and they were very unhappy with the way it works through the Open in sort of how you can basically, if you've got a big enough group of specialists on your, you know, in your gym's roster, how you can kind of put in the top scores, even if they're not even going to be the people on the team. And particularly when so few teams are progressing to the next stages. But we don't have time for that. That's a massive discussion. Probably
I will. I mean, when it comes to the teams and the CrossFit Games season, as far as I'm concerned, the only interest I have in teams during the Open is if someone is going to bother to tell me that they're actually competing on a team. So, for example, I love knowing that Noah Olson's competing team this year. I've eliminated from all my rankings that have to do with individuals. However, he still could potentially do the individual quarterfinals to try to get an extra spot for North America East at the semifinals, and I don't love that. Second thing is that the team competition. The other example is like there's this Krypton team. They did quite well on the overall leaderboard for semifinals. And if you look at their scores, it'll show the top 2 men from however many people they listed on the roster. And in some of the instances, it's Ben Smith and Alex Smith. On others, it's Dane Smith and Austin Spencer. And I'm like, okay, so are any of these guys competing individually this year? Which ones are competing on a team? Is it just every single person from their affiliate was just listed on this team and they'll just happen to be the best scores? It's completely useless for me. So I don't really like to focus on the teams until after the quarterfinals where we actually see the meaningful teams because they have to whittle them down to 6 at that point. But I still think that the team structure for the entire game season needs to be refined to some extent, and it sounds like you do too.
Yeah. Well, I think the simple thing would be, say, you could have 8 athletes in the Open, I would say. So 8 people in the Open can be registered on your team, and then 6 for quarterfinals, and the 6 on quarterfinals are your 4 plus 2 alternates, and that's it.
And that's the 6 you're riding with the rest of the season, no matter what. Yep. Simple, easy, done. Do it, please.
Okay, we'll clip this. We'll send it to CrossFit. We'll see if they get back to us.
That's a guarantee that it won't happen for about 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We will start wrapping things up. Leah, I know you've got an episode of your podcast out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Who are you speaking to?
Abby Domit. So she had a rookie season last year at the Games. So she's hoping to head back this year. Very, very, very nice human being. So yeah, cool episode. You can listen tomorrow morning or whenever.
She did do an off-season competition at the Fittest Experience. All of the episodes are available, or the heats are available to be watched. I did that on Instagram. It was before we started doing them on YouTube, but she got second place there, and she looked pretty good relative to the field, but it's not the strongest field.
Compliment sandwich there. It's like,
yeah.
Well, there's different things. Like there's different things that I'm looking at. When she was showing up to this competition, her and Sydney McAlishan were going there, and I knew that, of course, there's a potential for someone to come out of the woodworks and surprise. And actually, the girl that got third did do that very much, but she wasn't really close to those 2. But for those 2 athletes, I'm watching them completely differently. I'm actually watching them to kind of assess where they're at now, knowing that we're 3 months out from the competition that is going to matter for them, and kind of comparing it and contrasting it to the last times that I've seen them compete, or times that I've seen them be successful or not, to try to see, because, for a lot of athletes in our sport, you have to go 6, 9, 12 months before you get a chance to see them compete live again. I'm hopeful to try to decrease that gap for a lot of athletes who compete at the competitions that I'll be at the very least, because then you get an opportunity to learn more about what they've been up to or what they haven't. In a lot of competitions, you only get 5 or 6 workouts. If you get 2 competitions, now you have 10 or 12 workouts. It's twice as many opportunities to maybe learn something about that athlete. So her finish at that competition wasn't what was that meaningful to me. It was the performance, the way that she handled herself, a couple of specific movements or movement combinations that I was able to see her do. And I'm narrowing down the field based on what I do know about teams, injuries, pregnancies, not competing for whatever other reason. That's what I'm kind of doing these 2 weeks, or maybe these next 4 weeks, really honing in on that stuff. So a better idea on how I think Abby's going to do this year in about a month, but I think she should be in the mix at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. Wow. Look at that. It's nice to watch your process. I think we should document that. I'll follow you to a competition and just ask you questions about what are you looking at? What are you looking for here? What do you understand? Are you going to be at Rogue?
I intend to be.
I might actually meet you in person, Brian. That'd be nice. So far, I have a plane ticket and a hotel. I have no idea if I'll be able to get into The
That
Oh,
event
would be
I
itself?
think,
book
yeah.
the hotel,
They,
book the flights, and then everything else you can figure out later. That's what I've done.
they're yeah, they'll have a you know, a protocol for media, but you probably won't have even an opportunity to apply for that until August or September.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep refreshing the tab just to make sure. Of course, people can go. Where's the best place for people to find out what you do? Is it better to follow you or the Be Friendly Fitnessing Instagram? Or you've got the YouTube as well. Where should we direct people, Brian? Everywhere, I guess.
I mean, yeah, in any of those places, you'll find the information that you need. But Be Friendly Fitness YouTube is where you're gonna be able to actually watch live CrossFit competition. Jason would like to say add yeah, he's having too much fun. And yeah, and our podcast is the same. It's the same YouTube channel. Our Instagram is Be Friendly Fitness. So that's probably the best place. And if you like, you know, a little bit of diversity from CrossFit and want to see me do some disc golf, you can follow my personal page too.
So that would be the only reason. Just if you want to see some disc golf. Am I following the new grid season? Yeah, I've seen some people upset about people jumping between teams before the transfer window opened and things like that. Don't worry, I'm sort of on it. I'm across some spectrums, not as many as Brian, but I'm across some things. I just need to get into disc golf. That's all. Okay, well, thank you so much for. Okay, I'm just gonna block out the comments now. Thank you so much for joining me, Leah. Thank you, Brian. I will put, if you're listening to this, I'm going to follow kind of Peter's method of these will go out live depending on when I can book them in the week, but the audio will go up on Friday, as was the previous time slot. So if you're listening to this on Friday, all the future ones will still be on Friday. And in the description or the comment, the description, yeah, that's right, show notes, description, whatever it is on whatever you're listening to, I'll put links to Brian and Leah and the stuff that they're doing there as well. So thank you everyone that actually came and watched it. That was incredible. Thank you, Brian, for coming. Thank you, Leah, as well, and hopefully we'll see people again at the next one, but who knows.
Thank you very much.